Our scripture this morning, we are still walking through Timothy. We're in 1 Timothy. We're in chapter 2. And we're going through. We went through last week, we went through verses 1 through 8. Prayer in the church. Prayer in the church. Prayer in the people that make up the church. Prayer in the bride of Christ. Prayer. The importance of prayer. And it was like, we were just sitting there this week, and my wife made the point that, you know, if we actually took the time to pray for all men the way that we wouldn't have time for much else. If we really did it by who we knew, there's so much that we wouldn't have time for. The least of which is to be complaining about other things. to you know, be distracted by all the other distractions of life that try to come against us. You know, but if our concern was bringing men before God, if our concern was getting God into the lives of those who truly need Him, believers and unbelievers, as believers go through things, we need prayer. Paul asked for prayer.
Yeah.
A boldness to share the word. Not that he lacked it. We're talking about Paul. But the importance of prayer, the importance of being in that communication with God. On our own behalf, laying our own problems before Him, thanking Him and praising Him for who He is, petitioning on behalf of others, making supplication, and then just communicating with Him, that importance of prayer. And continuing on in 2 Timothy, I want to read verses 9 through 15 because that's what we'll be going on today. And we're just going to walk through that. Amen?
Amen.
1 Timothy chapter 1 verses 9 through 15. I'm reading from the King James Version. And it says, in like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. Let the women learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety. Amen.
Amen.
As I was meditating on this, and I was reading through it this week, I was perplexed. I was before the Lord quite a bit. Lord, yeah. Why? What's going on?
Yeah.
You got to speak to me, Father, because if I speak to this of myself, I'm going to have problems.
Yes, you would.
I'm going to cause problems.
Yes, you would.
So, Father, as usual, no more than usual, I can't do this by myself.
Yes, that's it, Pastor.
I wouldn't try.
Yeah, bless them, Lord.
Don't dare try.
Yeah.
So he just said, you're having problems because you're in the way. Get out of the way.
Yeah.
But that, no, don't but. Get out of the way. Put aside what you think and listen.
Yeah.
So I had to put aside. There were 2 days where I couldn't even read it. I had to meditate on it. And I had to just go before the Lord and say, what are you saying, Father?
Yeah.
And He being who He is, He showed me.
Yeah.
He gave it to me. We know God.
Just like Him.
We know God.
Yes.
One of my favorite verses now, James. We go back to James chapter 1. He said, knowing this. And I'm just taking part of a verse, which you never ever do and take it out of context, but it's hard to get that wrong. knowing this, because God works in the knowing.
Yeah.
There's something about knowing. When we say, you know my name, I'm not just affiliated with you. I'm not just associated with you.
Yeah.
There's a knowing. A knowing and an intimacy. There's that. So knowing this, we know who God is. We know how God is. We know the God we serve. So we know that God is not a woman basher. He created women.
Yes, he did.
He didn't create them to bash them. He didn't create them to put them aside, to put a rein on them, to put a muzzle on them, to relegate them.
Well, help us out now.
He didn't do that. We know that.
We know that.
We know that already.
We know that.
But if we read through this section of verses without remembering who God is, we start having trouble.
Yeah.
We start having trouble. Well, I'm gonna say I started having trouble.
Bring it up, Pastor.
I started.
Okay.
I gotta put it out there.
Oh. There we go.
But we know who God is.
We know.
We know that God is not saying women don't have a voice. We know that God is not saying women don't have a place. We know that God is not saying through Paul that women can't be used to do things. Because read the Old Testament. We got Deborah. We got Queen Esther. We got Ruth.
Yeah.
We got, come on now. Paul didn't have the power and authority to come in and change anything about the word. And that wasn't his interest. Because if you look at who Paul is and everything Paul teaches, Paul is about the gospel. It's about the gospel. If you come in with anything other than the gospel, he says, if I myself bring anything other than the gospel, don't you accept it. So, we got to get with where Paul. Look at who Paul was talking to. Look at where they were, why, and this and that. Amen. So we know that Paul left Timothy in Ephesus so that, let me see, chapter 1, verse 3, as I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus, when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine. The gospel has to be the gospel. The gospel must be preached in truth. So he opens up the letter with this. So we know that anything and everything contained in this letter is about maintaining the integrity of the gospel. So what Paul is addressing has to deal with maintaining the integrity of the gospel. He has to address, he's writing a letter to Timothy, and he's addressing the church, where the church is, geographically speaking, culturally speaking, to protect the integrity of the gospel. We know that Ephesus, we know that the Roman Empire had a great influence, was highly influential. Their culture, their religion was widely accepted. Why? Because it was hedonism, because it was fleshly, because it had zero discipline of the gospel. It had zero truth of the gospel to it. In fact, see, in the Roman world at that time, in Paul's letter to Timothy, the female principle was a part of the heathen religions. All those heathenist religions that they had there. Women were in prominent positions. And that's not to say that women are bad, but in the, obviously not. But in the religions practiced by the Roman Empire, a lot of which centered around prostitution, hedonism, zero self-control, and this was made into a religion. Prostitution had been made into a religion.
Sure was, Pastor.
As they worship in the temple of Diana, all of that, they referred to the 12. The Vestal Virgins. Those were basically just prostitutes. Everything in their religions had women in prominent positions. But these religions were basically self-indulgent. Hedonism. All about self.
Yes, yes.
All about self. So Paul, as the church, is established now in Ephesus. And he's leaving Timothy there to make sure no other doctrine is preached, that they don't give into so they don't heed to fables, they don't give into endless genealogies in order to protect the integrity of the gospel. Paul has to now tell Timothy how to establish the church in a manner so that the heathens can't slip their religion into the church.
Had to set a standard. Yeah, that hurt.
He had to set a
That's
standard.
good.
He had to set
I get
order.
it.
See,
yeah.
if a person reads through this in a carnal mind without Christ,
Yes.
you think, oh, this is a woman issue.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It was done for so long. That's it.
See, but if you hear, Jesus said, he who has ears to hear,
Here. Yeah.
ears to hear,
Yeah.
let him hear.
Yeah.
You can't have those ears without the Holy Spirit.
Come
You
on.
can't
Yeah.
have those ears.
Yeah.
But see, this is what we got going on right here.
Yes.
Ears to hear.
Yeah.
Hearing with the Holy Spirit.
Yes, Lord.
Paul is saying the church shall not look like
Yes.
what the heathens already have set up. He's not saying keep women out because women are less. God already established that.
Yes.
He took Eve from Adam's side
Yes.
so that she would be beside him,
Yeah.
not behind him,
Yeah.
not beneath him.
Yes. Yes.
We know, in fact, the word says God is no respecter of man. Acts 10:34. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. He goes on in verse 35. But in every nation, he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted in him. So there's no tiers,
Yes.
no levels, no gradations, no social statuses
Come on.
in God in the kingdom.
Come on.
You either are or you're not.
That's it.
You either covered by the blood or you're not.
Or you're not.
Simple. You are or you're not.
Yeah.
Paul is simply saying, keep the church. The church. Where we give no room for the devil. Give no room for evil to come in. Because certainly, if he had established it and set it up to where they could have easily slipped on over into.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Because we know that Paul's letter to the church at Galatia, untruth and unsound doctrine had slipped in.
Yeah. A bit of time. It did.
Subtly, a little bit at a time.
It sure did.
A little bit at a time. Paul's saying, no, we're not having that here.
Yes. Yes.
We're not going to have that here. We're not even going to set up, we're not even going to give them opportunity to say, well, you look like us.
Yes. Yes.
You look like us.
Yes.
Nope, you gets no opportunity. You gets no opportunity here.
Yes.
Verse 9, he says, in like manner, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair going. Simply saying, this is how you approach, this is how you're approaching the Lord.
Had to do it.
Because he's talking about as you're coming into worship.
And that time. Yes. Yes.
He's not talking about as you're going down to the 7-Eleven.
Yes.
He's not talking about as you go hanging out with your friends. He's talking about as you come into the presence of the Lord.
You had to do it. Yes. Yes. Had to do it.
That as you come in, again, really, that there's nothing wrong with any of this.
Yes. Yes. At that time.
Braided hair, nothing wrong with having braided hair, nothing wrong with having gold or pearls or costly array.
Had to do
But
it.
if it draws attention to you
Yes. At that. Yes.
instead of God,
Yes.
as they in this time
And they're just glad to
frame
do it.
in here,
Yes.
then it's not modest.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Then it's not modest.
Yes. It's good.
It says, but verse 10, but which becometh women professing godliness. You professing godliness, God is first.
Yeah.
God is first. God is the reason why you're doing everything, not your outward appearance. It is important. He doesn't want everybody. He says with shamefacedness and sobriety, but that does not mean low self-esteem.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't mean a sense of
No,
lowliness.
it doesn't.
That's a degrading self of lowliness.
Mm-mm.
But it's the lowliness of saying, oh, God, in your
God
presence,
first. Yes. Yes.
I'm nothing.
Yes.
God, in your presence,
Yes,
in
God,
comparatively
yes.
speaking,
Yes.
Father, I'm but a speck in your presence.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But see,
God's
we're not
presence.
self-abasing to the point of
No.
abuse. We're not self-abasing because we're also His children's.
Mhm.
Children's. We're also His children.
Yeah.
We're also the ones who can run and jump on His lap and kiss Him on the neck and say, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy.
Yes.
But He's also saying here again in verse 11, it says, let the women learn in silence with all subjection. Not taking away your voice. Not at all. But simply saying.
Thank you,
Because the world, because the heathens are doing it
Yes.
this way.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're going to do it this
This
way.
way. Have
To
to.
not look like
Yes. So not look like these.
to not
Yeah, God,
To
yeah,
get it right. Yes.
give them that foothold.
Foothold. Yes. And this. Yes. And
Not,
this.
not here,
Not
not
here,
today.
not
See,
now. Yes.
no,
Yes.
you can't get in.
Thank you.
Yes. Had to
Not
say.
to, you're not. It's not happening.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Jesus. Bring it out, Pastor.
Preaching.
Again, culturally speaking, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority
Mhm.
over the man, but to be in silence.
Mhm.
Usurp authority to take what's not yours, to take what you're not authorized to have. In this time,
Yes.
no, it just can't happen.
That's what they were doing out there.
It
Yes.
just can't happen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are places where another place in Scripture where Paul had to address the church, where the women weren't learning in silence, where they were talking out and speaking over the leaders. So he commanded them to learn in silence, but it was a matter of order.
Order.
Order in the
Order.
service.
It was
It
order in
wasn't
the
saying
service.
women do not speak it, because there's been too many people that God has used.
That's it, Pastor. Mm-hmm.
There's been too many women that God has used
Mm-hmm.
for anybody to come in and take this scripture and say
Yes.
and use it
Yes.
totally incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The word is not oppressive. The word is not a restraint, keeping one back over another, one in front of another. That's not what the word came to do. Jesus, whom the Son sets free is free indeed.
Yeah, Lord.
Where the Spirit is, there is liberty.
Yes, God.
Yes.
So there's too many burdens that have been broken. Too many yokes that have been lifted. For somebody to come in with and just take all of this out of the context of what Paul is saying here and why Paul is saying it. The integrity of the gospel has got to be protected at all costs. And if it was for this at this time for women to not sit back in the shadows and be overshadowed, but to step back and allow the word, to allow the gospel, to allow the church to be formed in a manner that separates itself from the world, then that's what was necessary for
Yes.
that
That's
time.
what was
To
necessary for
preserve
that time.
the gospel.
Yes. That
To preserve the integrity
preserve
of the
the
gospel.
integrity. Yes, Pastor. That's good. That's good teaching.
God is too intent
Yes.
for the salvation of those.
Yes.
He simply set order. He simply
Simply said.
set order. He's all about order.
Yes, he is.
1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 40.
Yes.
Let all things be done decently and in order.
In order. He's a God of order. Yes, he is.
When he was talking about that, he was talking about the speaking of tongues and having order in your worship service. God is about order.
Order.
He's all about order. Order in the church. Order in our lives. Order my
Yes.
steps, dear Lord.
Yes. Order
In
my
your
steps.
word.
In your word. Yes. Yes.
Order.
Yes.
He sets in order.
Yes. God said.
He does even set an order between men and women. Did not set one above the other by no stretch of the imagination. But it's an order of responsibility. Confirmed in the word. Simply because. Where he goes on to say, okay, verse 13, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 13. Following what he said in verse 12. For Adam was formed first and then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in transgression. Man had responsibility. The word transgression comes from the Greek word parabasis, P-A-R-A-B-A-S-I-S, parabasis, and it simply means violation. Eve was in violation.
She stepped out of order.
She stepped out of order. She was in violation because she ate the fruit. She was in violation, but Adam sinned. So every person proceeding from Adam and Eve was born sinful because of Adam. Adam bore responsibility because Adam was placed here first. If for some other reason God had created Eve first and Adam had been deceived and Eve would have sinned, then it would have been Eve that brought sin into the world.
Order.
Order. Order of responsibility. Not order of preference.
Order of responsibility.
Not order of superiority. Not simply order of responsibility. The man has certain responsibilities. Men have heavy responsibilities. Not that women don't. But in God's eyes, man carries a certain responsibility. Basic truth right there. Now, Eve, again, was in violation. And because of Eve, every woman from her on suffers the pain of childbirth. At my first base, I knew a doctor who was an OBGYN doctor, and we were in Bible study one time talking about those verses, and he was simply saying that the process of birth is simply muscular contractions. And just like any other, muscular contractions, no pain involved. No pain involved. So birth should involve no pain. Except that Eve was in violation. And God declared. So every woman after Eve would carry that because she was in violation. But every human being after Adam was born sinful because he bore that responsibility. Because that's who God is. And if anybody would take these verses out of context to say that men are over women, blah, 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 no. You're missing it. You're missing it, and you're missing it bad. Simply because in Ephesians chapter 5, those famous verses. Verse 5, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands as unto the Lord. As unto the Lord. As you submit to the Lord, you submit to your husband. It doesn't make him God. No. You submit to him as. Because honestly, if when the woman and the man are in contention about something and the man is wrong, if the woman steps back or basically ducks, that gives God room to do what he needs to do. To hit that target. To hit that target. He can punch, he can crush, he can do whatever it is he needs to do if she will submit. as unto the Lord. She's not submitting to him in his wrongness.
As unto the Lord.
Submit as unto the Lord.
As unto the Lord.
We just talked about Sarah,
Hmm.
who Abram allowed to be taken, and even told her to lie, and she submitted, and that gave God room
But
to
the Lord. Yes. Yes.
deal with that king,
But God.
because Sarah submitted. And even on the, you know, it happened more than one time, but on the second documented occasion, documented Sarah's silence, Sarah's submission
Yeah.
caused God to go in and talk to that king. You are a dead man. You
Yeah.
are as a dead man.
Yeah. You taught us that, Pastor. Yeah.
And he comes back and Abram's like, what I do to you, man?
You taught that.
Why?
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
So, but that gave God room to work.
Yeah.
Gave God room to work. But see, and then it goes on. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Love your wife as Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? That he gave himself for it. That's his cherished bride. That he did everything he did so that the bride would be unblemished. So that the bride would be prepared for him to come back for her. And even gave himself for her. So there's no room in here to believe that God gave a command, that Paul made it okay for a man to lord anything over his wife. To be the iron-fisted ruler of his household. Go ahead and try to be.
Yeah.
Go ahead and try to be. I wouldn't test God like that. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because when I've been in the workplace a few different times, and somebody would say something, and somebody else is moving back. It's like, like, I'm moving back because when God strikes you, I don't want to get hit. I was like, I ain't scared. God's accurate.
I ain't good.
He's accurate.
God,
I ain't moving.
He's accurate.
He's gonna strike this person. It's meant for that person. God's not about collateral damage. I'm not getting hit with shrapnel.
You know his name.
But see, I know his name. He knows my name.
Yeah.
But that's,
Go ahead up.
don't walk around thinking, please don't walk around thinking that you are authorized to be the iron-fisted ruler of your household, because Christ is not the iron-fisted ruler of his church.
Yeah. Free will.
He is not.
Yeah.
And he loved, and he gave himself for. Husbands, love your wives. That's not the Hallmark, warm, fuzzy, oh, I'll move the earth for you, oh, blah, blah, blah. That's love your wife. That's be patient and kind. That is bearing all things. That is love, trust. That's all of that. Husbands, love your wives, because that's how Christ loves the church.
Yeah.
So there's no iron fist in there. That's simply. And in verse 33, he backs it all up and says, nevertheless, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself. And the wife see that she reverence her husband. Reverence, respect.
Yes, Lord. Yes.
That's equality.
Yes.
That's equality. That's in the marriage relationship.
Yes.
That if a decision needs to be made, man, you will consult your wife. And y'all will talk about it. And if no decision can be equitably reached, the man can make that decision. Wife will submit. Not out of being lesser, but giving God room to work. If there's a wrong there that needs to be fixed, or what, but simply order. Order. Because order can bring about resolution. This is without a vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
Somebody has to write that vision. Somebody has to be responsible to write that vision, the leader, the head. So, in all of that, here we are. Verse 15, somebody says, notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing if it can continue in faith and charity and holiness. Being saved in childbearing doesn't mean that a woman has to obviously have a child, to be saved, to save her soul. It's in that women as a gender were vindicated through the ability to bear children. Because even though Eve was in transgression, she was in violation, her ability to give life, because how did the Savior come into the world?
Just like
Through Mary, so that all men
Yes, God.
could have opportunity to be saved. Through
Yes.
Adam, all men lost life. In the moment that you eat, you shall surely die. And though his physical body did not cease to live, spirit began in that moment to die. Separation from God, death. Separation from God is death. All those unbelievers walking around out there, they're walking dead. They're walking dead. But God made a way. But God made a way.
Thank you.
Glory.
Thank you, Lord.
Glory.
Hallelujah.
But again, all of this he put out there, all the completeness, the entirety of chapter 2, prayer in the church, prayer so that we can live peaceable lives,
Yes, Lord. Thank you.
quiet and peaceable lives
Yes.
in the midst of everything that's going on. No matter who's in authority, governmentally, no matter who's in authority, no matter what decision they make,
Yeah.
when we place them at the Father's feet, that gives us that peace, that oneness with God, that quietness, that be still, that stillness, that we're not having to run around and see what we can do to make things better, because we can't. Within the establishment of the church, as Paul was talking to Timothy in Ephesus, with everything that was going on around them, the church had to be established in a manner that it didn't look like the world. And God's doing the same thing today. He's doing the same thing today with the body of believers. Working hard to make sure, encouraging us in the word, to keep us in the word, to maintain the integrity of the gospel in our lives, so that we don't look like what's going on around us. So that everything is presenting itself as false religion, as false this, so that all the false teachers out there, all of those who would water down the gospel, all of those who would take God out of,
Help them, Lord.
that's what the world wants everything that the kingdom has, but they want to take God out of it.
Come on now, you preaching. Bless him.
See, that's like drinking decaffeinated coffee. You don't get the same effect.
Yes.
Take the caffeine out of the coffee, taste will be the same. Some people can taste the difference, I can't. But that what you get from the caffeine is not in the decaffeinated coffee. Decaffeinated religion, decaffeinated Christianity, dechristinated Christianity. The effect we get from that is eternal life. The effect we get from that is joy. The effect we get from that is peace. The effect we get from that is everything that the word tells us. But see, and the world wants all of that, but they don't want the Christ that brings it.
Thank you.
Cars can't bring it, money can't bring it, houses can't bring it, relationships can't bring it, position, authority, all these other things that man is trying to fill that hole with can't do that. Only God can do that. Only Jesus can do that. But we have to be willing to look different than the world. We have to be willing to be not like the world, to not do things the way the world does things. It's a setup. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. But we already know that God's equipped us. His word equips us Amen. Give God some